Help me welcome to the stage the author of Building a StoryBrand, Don Miller.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks. It's great to be with you. I love being introduced. It's just the highlight of my whole day because I really want to get a recording of that and wake up to it or play it for my wife, and say, do you know who I am? She doesn't. She just wants me to take out the trash. It's really great to be with you guys. Some people were asking me earlier, how did I get started doing this? And what I do is I help companies clarify their message. I'm convinced that a cluttered, noisy, or confusing message is costing most companies a lot of money, most sole proprietors a lot of money, most real estate agents, most loan advisors, most financial advisors. Confusion costs you a lot of money. But how I got started doing that, or how I realized that, is a whole other story, and it's a little bit funny. I was living in Portland, Oregon for 20 years. I live in Nashville, Tennessee now. But I was in Portland, Oregon for 20 years, and I was a writer. I wrote a lot of books, and they did pretty well. But when you're a writer, you basically just sit around in your boxer shorts by yourself writing books. And then about a year and a half later, people sit around in their boxer shorts reading them. There's not a whole lot of human interaction in the writing game. And my assistant came to me and she said, I think you should do a conference. And I said, okay. She said, if you just show up and speak, I'll do the conference. We'll get a bunch of people there. And it had been years since I'd really taught in front of a group. And I thought, okay, I'll give it a try. I did it, and I absolutely loved it. I realized I just love to teach. And the only problem was we'd rented a theater in Portland that has about 700 seats, and only 350 people showed up. Now, I'm kind of driven like you are, and I'm not a glasses half full guy. I'm definitely a glasses half empty. We have to fill the glass. And so the room is empty, and it kind of bothered me. But we got the surveys back when we were done with the conference, and the reviews were glowing. I mean, people just really liked it. They said they'd tell their friends about it, so on and so on. So I thought, problem solved. If you build it, they will come, right? And that's the biggest lie in business, because the next time we actually had a conference, we had 350 people there. And I had a buddy of mine pull me aside, he's a business guy, and he said, Don, you've sold millions of books, but something's wrong. You can't get people to come to your conference. And I said, thanks. I appreciate that, right? And I realized the problem actually when I got on an airplane one morning out of Portland, Oregon. I was flying to Indianapolis, Indiana. I show up at the airport, I get on the airplane, and the gentleman sitting next to me is reading my latest book. And that had never happened to me before. I'd never seen one of my books in the wild. I was very excited. I didn't know what to do. What would you do? That's my book. I don't know. You can't really, it's very hard to figure out what you do in that moment. I thought maybe I'll read it to him. We'll do the audio book. Just do it live. It actually, I'm such an introvert. I come alive when I'm on stage, and when I get off stage, I just stop talking. And last night, it happened for the second time. On the way to Boston, there was a gentleman sitting in front of me. He was reading my book. And my wife was like, what did you say? And I said, nothing. I don't know what to say, right? And so that happened, but I actually talked to the guy. I said to him, do you like that book? And he said, I love this book. It's the third time I've read it. In fact, I'm flying to Indianapolis to hear this guy speak tonight. And I thought, so am I. And I didn't tell him who I was. My picture is on the back cover of the book, so I'm like, he's going to get it in a minute, but he never got it. So for 2 hours, you do the same thing. I just asked him questions about my brand and all this kind of stuff. And you know what? The more he talked, the less I wanted to buy my own books. He would say things, well, like you have to read them to understand and things like that. I didn't even want to hear myself talk that night in Indianapolis. And it really taught me something. It taught me that, I'm pretty good at writing 300 pages, but terrible at writing one sentence that would get somebody to want to buy the 300 pages. And I think that's the challenge for almost all of us. We're really competent and great at our jobs, but are we great at explaining what we offer to the public so that they actually want to buy it? The truth is, I never told him who I was. I thought he's going to figure it out tonight. And he never came up to me afterwards, so if you meet that gentleman, tell him I'm very, very sorry. But I learned something really great that day. And I learned really that most companies waste an enormous amount of money on marketing. And the reason is because their message isn't clear. It's not distilled down to a soundbite. Or it is distilled and it's just confusing. The NFL right now is running a campaign that I happened to catch the tail end of last year called Crucial Catch. If you watch an NFL game, you might see this month Crucial Catch painted in the end zones of various NFL stadiums. Now, when I first saw that, I thought, Crucial Catch. And there are these 3 colorful bars on either side of the words Crucial Catch. They look like the old Polaroid logo. And I actually thought, this must be Polaroid releasing a line of digital cameras or something. Maybe they're coming back. And I said to my wife, you know, if they're releasing a line of digital cameras, I still think this is a giant waste of money. If you just painted, we're releasing a line of digital cameras, you'd sell more of them than whatever this Crucial Catch business is. 3 weeks later, I find out this is not Polaroid selling a line of digital cameras. It's a cancer awareness campaign. And you say, well, how in the world did they mess that up, right? Well, it's pretty easy. If you think about it, you have an opportunity to get an end zone in the NFL, so you hire the biggest ad agency somewhere, and they sit around and they say, well, how do we associate football with cancer? Well, you know, you have to catch cancer early. You have to get screened. Well, you catch a football. Well, in the end zone, it's a crucial catch. Oh my gosh, cancer is a crucial catch. What if we paint Crucial Catch in the end zone? And they failed to realize nobody else was involved in that conversation. I mean, if you have to explain your advertising is failing you, right? You shouldn't have to explain anything. Most people buy things because they read or hear words that make them want to buy things. It's the words that we use, and they need to be crystal clear. Think about the last thing that you bought. It was probably on Amazon, right? You read a brief description of the product, and then you went down and you read some reviews of the product, and something in one of those reviews probably checked a box in your brain because you wanted to buy that thing anyway, and you were able to justify it, and you clicked Buy Now. Amazon is not a very attractive website. I'm sure there's all sorts of algorithms that dictate how it works, but really it was the words that you used. And so a lot of us, when we want to put together a website as a real estate agent or we want to talk to a client, maybe we will hire somebody to create a website for us, and we hire somebody's niece who has a degree in Photoshop, and we pay $5,000, and it looks really beautiful, but sales don't increase. And the reason is we paid somebody $5,000 who has a degree in Photoshop but has never read a single book about how to write words that make people want to buy things. You can have a really ugly website with great words, and it's going to do really well. It's what we say in our marketing that actually makes the difference. It's the words that we use. Well, if we're going to think about structuring the words that we use and coming up with a message system that grows your company or grows your effort as a real estate agent, there's 2 things that we need to understand about the human brain. Whenever you talk to somebody, there are 2 things that their brain is always doing. Even as I'm talking to you, there are 2 major things that your brain is doing as I'm talking to you. The first thing that your brain is tasked with, its priority, is to keep you alive. That's the job of the brain. It is trying to help you survive and thrive. Now, in a first world economy, we have food and shelter figured out, that level on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So we've moved up to more sophisticated ways of surviving, association with a tribe. That's one of the reasons that you're here. You're actually gathering information that's going to help you succeed as a real estate agent, and you're also associating with a tribe. Both of those are survival mechanisms. When you really study your own behavior, you realize really quickly almost everything you do is about getting ahead, surviving, and thriving. What this means is that we are constantly scanning our environment for information, for data that is going to help us survive and thrive. Association with a tribe, status, saving money, making money, organizing our thoughts, experiencing less stress. All of those are survival mechanisms, and it actually gets pretty complicated pretty quick. So Samuel, if I actually said to you, hey, I'm going back there, can I get you a refill on your cup of coffee? Samuel would say, boy, Don's a really nice guy. He's getting me a refill on my cup of coffee. Technically, that's not actually what's happening. What's happening is I'm saying, Samuel, can I get you a refill on your cup of coffee so that you will like me and we will create a connection so that if barbarians come over the hill behind our cul-de-sac tonight, you will fight with me. That's actually what's happening. And poor Samuel, I get him a cup of coffee, and tonight the barbarian's coming. He goes, well, I guess I got to go fight with Don, And it's a very complicated mechanism, but we're always looking for something that's going to help us survive and thrive. Therefore, if you position your product as something that will help people survive, people are going to pay attention, right? People are going to pay attention because they're scanning their environment, looking for things that will help them survive. So we have to figure out, how do you as a real estate agent help somebody get ahead? Will they have a more comfortable home? Will they have greater status? Will they have a payment that is reasonable? When you list all of those things, they're checking off in their box. That's going to help me survive. That's going to help me survive. That's going to help me survive. And a lot of times we don't do that. As business leaders, we make a huge mistake. We say things like, when somebody asks what we do, we say things like, well, it's complicated. My grandfather started a company many years ago, and I'm trying to blah, blah, blah. And they're scanning what you're saying, wondering how any of it's going to help them survive. And at some point, 3 or 4 things down the road, that doesn't help me, that doesn't help me, that doesn't help me, that doesn't help me. Their brain says, let's tune this person out. And the reason their brain says, let's tune this person out, is because it's a survival mechanism. And that's because the second thing that the brain is trying to do, it's trying to conserve calories. Your brain burns between 600 and 800 calories every day processing information. Today, a lot more. You will go to your room tonight, you will be very, very tired, and you will wonder why, because you really just sat down and listened to speakers, and you took a bunch of notes. Well, what was really happening is your brain was running on a treadmill all day. And at some point, you can see that if you're processing information that isn't going to help you survive and thrive, your brain just says, hey, let's tune this out, because barbarians might come over the hill behind our cul-de-sac tonight, and we need to conserve some energy for that, right? That means when you're at a cocktail party and somebody says, what do? And you say, well, it's complicated. Well, you just told them, you're going to have to burn a lot of calories to listen to me right now, and there's no promise of your survival. And they're really just, you don't realize it, they're just trying to get away from you. And there's bacon-wrapped dates being passed around behind you. And those bacon-wrapped dates have everything to do with their survival, and the story of your grandfather has nothing to do with their survival, and so their eyes glaze over and they stop paying attention. And the equivalent of that is happening most of the time when people go to your website or hear your elevator pitch or respond to your sales call or get your sales call. Their eyes are glazing over because they can't figure out how you're helping them survive, and in such a simple way they don't have to burn very many calories. So what we need to do is we need to reduce, if you will, our message so that it associates with our customer survival and it doesn't make them burn very many calories to understand it. We need a simple messaging strategy. Let me prove my point. What did Jeb Bush want to do with America? Exactly. That's exactly it. You got it right. We don't know. Very intelligent man, a scholar, wrote a book on immigration, wrote a book last year on education. He knows what he's talking about. Successful governor who went around the country in hundreds of town hall meetings and answered questions, but never came up with a soundbite. So people had to process a ton of information, burn a bunch of calories. They couldn't figure out how this person is going to help me survive. Could he? I think he probably could have. What did Donald Trump want to do with America? That's right, make America great again. He reduced it all down to a soundbite. Now, listen, this is very important for us to understand. One candidate shared a ton of what they thought was valuable information. Another candidate led an entire country through a memorization exercise. Do you see the difference? One person was dispelling information, disseminating information, and another person was branding. And so who do we remember? We remember the person who branded themselves into our subconscious in the context of a narrative that is going to help you survive and thrive. Now this brings up another point. People do not buy the best products and services. They buy the ones they can understand the fastest. They do not follow the best leaders. They follow the ones that they can understand the fastest because it is a survival mechanism. In other words, everybody's saying, don't make me think. I don't want to burn that many calories. And in the last presidential election, there were no calories burned processing information. It just didn't happen. We just went, oh, that sounds good. Do that. Like, this guy's like reading War and Peace. Yeah. So we want to create a very simple messaging strategy. Every time that you hand a potential customer a piece of information, I want you to visualize something. I want you to picture yourself handing them an 8-pound bowling ball. So every piece of information, you're handing this guy an 8-pound bowling ball. And you're talking about, if you hand them information that is inside language, if you start talking about adjustable mortgage rates and all the terminology inside language that you're using, that's like an 8-pound bowling ball wrapped in Vaseline and handed to them. It's just really slippery. It's going to be very hard for them to process the information. Now, this is difficult for us to understand because we are so close to our products and services. We understand it so well that we project that knowledge onto our clients. So what we've experienced as a light balloon, they experience as an 8-pound bowling ball. And they're not going to be able to carry as much as you're going to be able to carry. And so you really want to reduce things down to a soundbite. You want to repeat those sound bites over and over so they understand your value in the equation. You hand them a second bowling ball, and things are getting a little bit sweaty here. You hand them a third, and they're probably at the end. Now, I've gone to websites, and I review thousands of websites every year for clients. I'll go to websites, and they'll hand you 15 bowling balls within the first paragraph of the website. And they're all the people who are reading those things are dropping. They're not paying any more attention. How many bowling balls do you think he'll drop when we hand him the fourth bowling ball? All of them. Let's see if there's scientific. Yeah, there is. There's scientific evidence of that. Yeah, you just can't process that much information. In fact, studies show that if people have 3 choices, they're most likely to buy. 4 choices is slightly less, and 5 choices they won't buy. Why? Because they're being asked to process too much information. And it's not because people are stupid. They're not stupid. They're actually way more sophisticated than we can possibly imagine in terms of them staying alive on the planet. If you didn't have this mechanism, your life would be completely unmanageable. I mean, you would walk into a Starbucks this morning and you would pick up a pound of coffee and you would look at that pound of coffee and say, well, this is kind of heavy, but this paper's interesting. It kind of feels like metal, but it acts like paper. And there's these little aluminum flaps. So that's fascinating. 3 hours later, you would still be standing there going, I wonder if they used a glue. Because your brain doesn't have the mechanism that says, stop it, you don't need this information. So I'm very grateful that we have this, but we have to learn to understand how it works in order to talk to clients so that they will listen to us. We have a mantra at my company, StoryBrand, and it's this: if you confuse, you'll lose. We never want our customers to be confused about the process of buying a home. Your secret advantage is going to be clarity. Clarity, clarity. That means when we walk into a meeting with a client, we're going to say, hey, we're going to talk about a lot of things today, but the one thing that I want to decide on is this. So the one thing I want us to understand, and we frame that encounter so that when they leave a meeting with us, they realize they got something out of it, right? It wasn't confusing. The way we're going to not be confusing to our clients is I'm going to introduce you to the elements of story. Now, I know this sounds like you just signed up for a screenwriting seminar, and we're not a bunch of artists, but I want to promise you that story is actually very scientific. It's incredibly formulaic. It has been passed down for generations. For over 2,000 years, we've been studying the best practices in storytelling. And the reason I'm interested in story for the purposes of talking to a bunch of real estate agents about growing their business is because story is the most powerful tool there is to compel a human brain. Nothing works better than story. In fact, the average brain daydreams 30% of the time. 30% of the time you're daydreaming. Slightly more this afternoon, but normally about 30% of the time. And that in itself is a survival mechanism. Your brain is getting a break because the information that's being handed to it is not interesting for your survival. And so you take a break and you start to daydream. And it's really great. Interestingly, though, when you actually sit down in a theater and the lights dim and Jason Bourne shows up on the screen, you won't daydream for the next 90 minutes, 2 hours, or 3 hours. And that is a miracle. There is absolutely nothing known to man that can get a human being to pay attention for that long other than story. And so I'm very curious about how story works for the purposes of getting you what you need, which is attention. Story is formulaic. In fact, in the next hour and a half, I'm probably going to ruin stories for you a little bit There are really only 7 stories that get told in a theater, and if you know what they are, you know which ones you're going into. My wife hates going to movies with me because at some point I'm going to elbow her and say, this guy dies in 31 minutes, and he does. They're just that formulaic. There are things that have to happen every few minutes in a story to keep somebody's attention. This grid are the 7 things that happen in all 7 stories. So if there are 7 stories, these 7 things happen in all of them. If we were really looking at narrative from a screenwriting perspective, there would be 35 or 36 of these plot points. But for business, I just want to look at 7 of them, and I think this is a universal human language. I think these are the 7 things people spend the most time thinking about. It's a well-worn path in the human brain, and we want to put our real estate business on that path because that's where the most traffic is happening. I'm going to go through this, and with each plot point, there's going to be a paradigm shift that's going to change the way we think about messaging and marketing, and I think even change the way we do business, and maybe even change the way your heart encounters the world. The first thing that you have to have in a story is a character. A character shows up on screen, and within 3 minutes, we have to define something that character wants. If you don't define something the character wants, within 3 minutes, you will start to lose the audience. They will start to daydream. Stories exist and interest us because they ask questions and answer them later. They posit questions and then they answer them later. They open story loops and then they close them later. And the very first question that gets asked in a story is, what does this character want? Now, there are 2 mistakes amateur screenwriters make, and they happen to be the same mistakes that business leaders make, the same mistake that real estate agents make. The first mistake is this: they are too vague. If a screenwriter is too vague about what the character wants, the audience will be asked to burn too many calories and they will begin to check out. If you've ever been bored during a movie or walked out of a movie or stopped a Netflix series, it's because they broke one of these rules. They didn't define something the character wanted, or they were too vague. If I said, hey, do you want to skip this afternoon session and go see a movie with me? It's about a guy who's looking for fulfillment. Is that interesting? No, it's too vague. And yet I'll review business leaders' websites, and they'll say something in huge letters across the top of the page. They'll say something like, trust is the commodity we exchange. What in the world does that mean? I have no idea what that means. It sounds cute, it sounds clever, it sounds official to some degree, and it offers the reader nothing. And they're not going to buy from you if you say things like that. We just can't be confusing. I have a weird, dark thing going on. I like to take pictures of bad advertising. I just go around with my phone, I go, that's terrible, and I take a picture of it. I don't know why I'm collecting it. It's a terrible thing. They're probably going to talk about it at my funeral, but that's what I do. And my landscaping guy, his name is Drew, and he's got a company called Drew's Landscaping. And all over his trucks, it says Drew's Landscaping. And I actually caught another truck in the neighborhood the other day, and it was Horticultural Solutions. That's the name of the company. And I thought, there's a reason there's not very many of those trucks, and there's a lot of Drew's Landscaping trucks, because I don't know what horticultural solutions actually are. I've never walked out into my yard and seen it being messy and said, honey, call a horticulturalist. We got to mow this thing, right? We're trying to sound smart and sophisticated, and it's costing us business. People just want to know what's the basic truth. We have to tell them, and we can't be vague. Now, the second mistake that I think a lot of business leaders make, and definitely real estate agents make this mistake too, is they'll define too many things that the hero wants, too many things that the customer wants. If we go to a movie and Jason Bourne comes on screen and it becomes very obvious within 3 minutes that Jason Bourne wants to know who he really is, and he also wants to lose 30 pounds, and he's thinking about marrying the girl, and he'd like to run a marathon, and he's doing some research because he'd like to do it ethically, he's thinking about adopting a cat. We have lost the plot of the movie. You have thrown so many bowling balls at the audience that they are no longer actually paying attention. And it's true in business as well. If your company offers 15 or 27 things, and you talk about those things all the time, you are not going to do good business. Because people don't have room in their brain to categorize you under 15 or 27 problems that you solve. They really have room for one. And you want to be known for that one thing, right? I'm the person who gets you this. I'm the person who gets you a dream home at a price you can actually afford. And you want to be known as that. And you brand yourself in your customers' minds as that person. Raise your hand if you've ever branded a cow. It's usually a few. This is definitely not a Texas audience. There's 4 of us. Okay. If you've ever branded a cow, it's a really unique experience. A buddy of mine has a cattle ranch. We went out, we branded cattle one day. You lay across the back of the calf, and you take the brand, and you put it on the back of the calf. They don't feel as much pain as you and I would. They just kind of go, hey, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm branding you. You brand the cow, and then you get what would happen, though, if I got a different rancher's brand, I put it over the top of that one. And a different rancher's brand, I put over the top of that one. And would you be able to tell whose cow that is? No, you wouldn't. That's how most of us are branding our companies. We're not using the exact same language, repeated in the exact same way, so that it brands ourselves into our customers' subconscious. The average consumer has to hear a message 8 times before they metabolize it. So if your customer has to hear 8 times in the exact same language what you do in order to how many times do you have to say it? Probably 250 times. You need to say it in person the same way that you say it on your website, the same way it's printed on your business card, and the same way it's printed in your email signature. If you have agents under you, they need to be actually using the exact same language. That's branding. And you can win when you get the entire team aligned on the same message. We define something that our customer wants. Now here's where a room normally says, but Dom, what is the right thing to say? It's a difficult question because there are probably 50,000 right things to say. The most important thing is that you actually just make a decision and leave everything else out. I'm just going to keep repeating this because that's how I'm going to be known. And people really will follow you if you begin to tell them, this is who I am. They're wondering how to categorize you, and you need to tell them. This last workshop I did in Nashville, Tennessee, where I live, we had about 150 business leaders come in, and I was getting to this point, and I said, this brings me to a good point, but I'm going to make that point on the curb outside of this building. So everybody get up and let's go to the curb outside the building. And everybody kind of went, okay, I guess that's what we're doing. And everybody started getting up. We filed out the doors. We went out onto the curb, and I got a bullhorn, and I stood on a box. And I said, okay, here's what I wanted to tell you. People will go where you tell them to go. All right, let's go back inside. And then we all went back inside. But I really wanted to illustrate a point right at the beginning of this process that we're about to get into, and that is people want to be taken somewhere, and you can take them somewhere. You can take them into a dream home. You can take them into a home that has room for their kids. You can take them into a home with a better price point. You can take them to a place where they don't argue as much. You can take them into a better school district. They want to be taken somewhere. And you are their leader. You're not just their real estate agent. In part, you're their therapist, as you know. You're their marriage counselor. You're their financial advisor. You play a lot of different roles, but you are the guide and the leader in their story. We define something that they want, and it piques a curiosity about what we can do for them. It begins the story. And then what screenwriters will do is they'll hook you in the story by defining a problem. A story really doesn't get started until there is a problem. The hero has to want something, and then they can't get it. And they don't get it for 90 minutes or 2 hours until the climactic scene of the story. The problem has to be held out. And what this means for us is the only reason any of us are doing any kind of business, the only reason anybody's going to our website, the only reason anybody is calling us is because they have a problem. You are somebody who solves problems. The problem is the motivator in the film, and it's the motivator in life. The only reason we do anything is to solve a problem. And if you've defined that problem, you're going to motivate much more energy toward whatever it is where you want people to actually go. The problem is everything. When you resolve the problem in a story, the story ends. It's over. You can just roll the credits. Can you imagine a story where the problem is resolved, say, 15 or 20 minutes in, and then the movie keeps going for an hour? Liam Neeson is on an airplane. He's flying over the Atlantic to rescue his daughter. She's been kidnapped. And he gets a call, and the call says, Liam, you won't believe it. It was a college prank. She's fine. She's really excited about you coming over, though. She wants to do some shopping, and she's thinking about grad school. And the whole 90 minutes of the rest of the movie is Liam Neeson shopping with his daughter. And there's not even any conflict there. Everything fits. It's all on sale. She's clearly going to Princeton. There is zero conflict in this story. And you are bored out of your mind. You're literally sitting there in theater going, is this a practical joke? This movie is going nowhere. Why? Because they resolved the problem. And what this means for us is every time we get together with a client, we need to say, hey, last time we talked, you talked about this problem, right? And I think this house will resolve that problem. What did you do? You just highlighted a problem that they talked about in their life, and the resolution of the problem is the purchasing of the house. Or you actually ask the question the very first time you meet with somebody, have you ever bought a house before? What was the biggest problem with the last real estate agent that you worked with? Well, it was this and this. We never could get into a house, or there were houses that we really wanted on the market and they wouldn't show them to us or whatever. And you would say, that's a problem with a lot of real estate agents. I'm going to make sure not to do that to you. What'd you just do? You position yourself as the person who doesn't cause that problem in their life. You increase the value to them as a guide. All right, now here's where I really am going to ruin movies for you. There are normally 3 levels. By the way, I'm not really going to ruin movies. I like studying them and also enjoying them. But there are 3 levels of problems that take place in almost every story. The external problem, the internal problem, and the philosophical problem. And the reason there are 3 levels of problems in every story is because every human being experiences 3 levels of problems in their life. And you're in the business of solving these 3 levels of problems. The external problem in the story is usually the physical problem. It's the bomb that needs to be disarmed. The guy wants to marry the girl. The woman wants a raise and a promotion. Rudy wants to be on the football team. There's some sort of external problem that needs to be resolved. But if you made a story about only an external problem, you would lose the audience. The purpose of the external problem in the narrative is to manifest the internal problem. And that is the way the hero actually feels about what he or she is having to do in this story. And here's the business point for us. Corporations tend to sell solutions to external problems, but human beings buy solutions to internal problems. In other words, you would sell a lot more houses if you didn't sell houses, you sold a resolution to the frustration that the customer had because they wanted the house in the first place, right? We need to pay attention to the fact we're dealing with human beings. Then there's this 3rd level of stakes, and it's philosophical. It's the shoulds, the ought tos, the good versus evil, justice versus injustice, altruism versus selfishness. There's an epic story that's happening. And a magical story will actually resolve the external, internal, and philosophical problem in one shot, 9 minutes before the end of the film. So when Luke Skywalker is flying his X-Wing fighter through the trench in the Death Star. Do you remember this scene from when you were like 8 or 12 years old? Yeah. Luke Skywalker is flying his X-Wing fighter, and he's got to shoot the little laser beam through the hole in the Death Star to blow it up. This is normally where I get letters from people. They say to me, you claim to know a lot about story, but it was actually a proton torpedo? I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher this. I normally send that person a book, How to Date, and then we tackle the internal problem, and then later we'll make you some money. But when he shoots the proton torpedo, I actually spoke yesterday, and I said photon torpedo, and I literally got an email saying it's not photon torpedo, it's proton torpedo. So these people actually exist. And when he shoots that torpedo through the exhaust valve in the Death Star and blows it up, the external problem is he's got to destroy the Death Star. The internal problem is he wonders, and he's wondered the entire film, whether he actually has what it takes to be a Jedi. And the philosophical problem is good versus evil. Darth Vader has been behind him the whole time, and remember he shot R2-D2 in the head and he killed another Jedi, and it's reminding us this is an evil guy. And when he lands that laser, that photon torpedo, through the exhaust valve, the external problem is resolved, the internal problem is resolved, and the philosophical problem is resolved in one shot. And what happens in the mind of an audience when that happens is a little bit of serotonin seeps through the amygdala of the movie-going audience, and they sense pleasure. What happened in the movie is they had opened 3 levels of story loop, external, internal, and philosophical. And they closed it in the climactic scene. Well, what's the business principle for us? We need to frame the buying of a house as the resolution of an external, internal, and philosophical problem. And when somebody actually signs the paperwork, they are closing that story loop. And when you do that, your interaction with your customer will make sense to them. You will have played a role in their life, and you will have guided them through a story. You'll see this all over in film from now on. In The King's Speech, the external problem is the king has a stutter. He's not able to give a good speech. The internal problem is he's wondering whether or not he's been saddled with a responsibility that is beyond him. He cannot live up to his father's legacy. And the philosophical problem is, of course, Nazis versus the Allies. It's another good versus evil story. And so 9 minutes from the end, when he actually gives the flawless speech, the external problem, the internal problem, the philosophical problem are resolved in one shot. What would happen on your website if you have, and I'm going to show you websites here in a minute, but what would happen on your website if you actually frame the purchasing of a house as the resolution of an external, internal, and philosophical problem, and to schedule an appointment or schedule a consultation, the equivalent of a buy now button in your industry, was the resolution of those? You would massively motivate human behavior a lot more, because we're all looking for the resolution of the external, internal, and philosophical problem. I've used some shallow examples. Let me use a Shakespearean one. Karate Kid. Karate Kid, right? Daniel, at the end of Karate Kid, he's got the crane kick going on. Do you remember that? And they've set up the climactic scene. What is the external problem that Daniel has to resolve in that scene? What is it? He has to win the karate tournament. Don't overthink it. It's just a physical thing he has to do. Internally, is he feeling really confident, or is he wondering whether he has what it takes? He's wondering whether he has what it takes. And then philosophically, it's another good versus evil story. What did the bad guy do right before that scene? He swept the leg. That's right. And you'll normally see this in a movie. At the end scene, the good guy and the bad guy are going man on man against each other, right? And then the bad guy will come over here and he'll strangle a cat real quick, and then he'll come back and say, let's go. And that's a little screenplay trick that reminds you that guy's evil. We got to take that guy down, right? But the external, internal, and philosophical are all closed in one shot. How does this apply to business? Because it sounds so artistic. How in the world will we apply this to real estate? It's super easy. We actually work with about 3,000 companies a year. One of those companies a few years ago was Chick-fil-A. Raise your hand if you have Chick-fil-A in your area. Chick-fil-A is a chicken, people, see, they have raving fans, and I'm about to explain why they have raving fans. They've played a psychological trick on you. When you go to buy a chicken sandwich at Chick-fil-A, what is the external problem that you're trying to resolve? Hunger, lunch. Yeah, don't overthink it. Now, internally, how do you feel about yourself when you walk into a fast food restaurant? Not great. Yeah, like once a quarter I walk into a Burger King and I always think, it has come to this. And then philosophically, internally, Chick-fil-A has resolved some of that conflict. The restaurants are clean. The people who work there actually want to work there. At other fast food places, I give them my $5. They don't want to be there. I don't want to be here. Nobody here wants to be here doing what we're doing. It's like supporting some form of human trafficking. I don't know what we're doing here. But Chick-fil-A is a different experience. Then philosophically, they are closed on Sundays. They're a values-driven brand. They're saying to the community, we care about a lot of stuff more than we care about money. We care about people more than money. Actually, like the fifth time I went to headquarters, I realized what this is. This is a Southern Baptist church selling chicken. That's all this is. The external, internal, and philosophical problem is resolved in one shot. When you pay $5 for that chicken sandwich, I'm solving hunger, I'm solving I don't have to feel bad about myself for eating here, and I'm associating my values with a brand that cares about people, right? Or, that's part of their whole ethos. How are they doing? Well, the average Burger King does $1.5 million per store per year. The average McDonald's is $2.5 to $2.7 million per store per year. The average Chick-fil-A does $5.2 million with the opportunity cost of being closed on Sunday. What does that mean? It means they're selling a lot more than chicken. They're actually framing a buying experience for their audience so that they're resolving 3 levels of story loops in one shot, the buy now button. Now, how can we do this as real estate agents? It means when we meet with somebody, we have to say, hey, listen, I know you guys are looking for a new house and you're cramped in your current house. External problem. I understand that shopping for a house can be very frustrating. It can actually cause a lot of arguments in the home, right? It shouldn't be that hard. It should be one of the most joyful experiences of your life. All right, let's get started. I just give you one sentence that opened an external, internal, and philosophical story loop in the customer's brain. And what they're doing when they hear that sentence is they say, man, that just, you put it that way, right? That makes complete sense. I've never heard people talk about rates and, property and taxes and school. I've never heard it, and they don't even know why they're so drawn to you, but they're drawn to you because you just invited them into a story that promises a climactic scene at the end, and that's the great motivation of all human behavior. And that's really where you step into the story, because after we define something they want, and we're not vague, and we don't define too many things, and we define 3 levels of problems that our customer is experiencing, we now make sense in their lives, and we position ourselves in their lives as the guide. Now, the guide is a character that comes into the screenplay to help the hero win the day. Luke Skywalker had Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda. Sometimes there are multiple guides. Katniss in the Hunger Games, right, had Woody from Cheers. He shows up to help her win the day. On and on. King George in King's Speech had Lionel. Romeo actually had Juliet. Juliet was the Christ figure or the guide in the movie. Here's the biggest paradigm shift I'm going to give you in this little workshop. Never play the hero in the story. Always play the guide. Never play the hero in the story. Always play the guide. Why? Because customers aren't looking for another hero. They're looking for a guide. They're looking for somebody who can help them win the day. So people come to me all the time and say, Don, we've got such a great story, we need help telling our story. And I say to them, it's a great way to go bankrupt. Sadly, people don't really care as much about your story as they care about their own. So let's actually talk about the thing that they care about, their story. And that's what the guide does. There are 2 main reasons you never want to position yourself as the hero in the story. The first reason is this. When you position yourself as the hero in the story, you remove yourself from your customer's story. So if I meet you at a cocktail party, and I say, what do you do? And you say, well, it's complicated. My grandfather started a company many years ago, and we're trying to increase our great places to work metric, blah, blah, blah. I hear, I'm a hero in a story, and you are a hero in a story. And if I'm a hero in a story, and you are a hero in a story, we are in separate stories. You have effectively removed yourself from my story. And I may actually be very curious as to how your story works out, but what I'm not going to do is do business with you. I'm actually going to say, that's very interesting. Please keep me posted on how that works out. If you don't mind stepping aside, I'm looking for a guide, not another hero. There's a second reason, and it's even more important, that you don't want to play the hero in the story. It's this. The hero is a weak character. They're a weak character. Normally, at the end of a story, we see the hero and they've won the day and we think of them as strong, but we forgot what happened in the previous 2 hours. In the previous 2 hours, they were ill-equipped, they were scared to death, they were unwilling to take action, they were full of self-doubt, and they were in desperate need of help. Now, what would happen if somebody came to you and said, you know what, we're looking for a new home. Can I talk to you about that? Could you be my real estate agent? You said, I'll try. I don't know what I'm doing, right? But you and I can do it together, and maybe you can help me pay for my mortgage in the process. Yeah, that is actually the hero's journey, right? You're not the hero, you're the guide. The reason you want to position yourself as a guide is the guide is the strongest character in the story. The guide has already conquered whatever demons the hero is having to go through. They've already conquered those challenges. That's in their backstory. But right now, I know what I'm doing, right? I can get you out. There are 2 things that you want to do to position yourself as the guide in your customer's story. This 1-2 punch will revolutionize your relationship with clients. The first thing that you need to do is demonstrate or express empathy. Empathy. And empathy is nothing more than, I feel your pain. Remember Bill Clinton? I feel your pain, right? I understand how hard it is to X. I have a lot of clients who feel this way about buying. Buying a house can be really frustrating. I understand that. Just that statement is a magical statement in your client's life because they say, maybe this person is my guide. Their story is about me, not about them. I know we're tempted to play the hero in the story, but just think about it. We love heroes in America. We certainly do. We honor them, but we don't vote for them. John McCain was a war hero, wasn't elected president. John Kerry was a war hero, not elected president. Bob Dole was a war hero, not elected president. Every time we chose the candidate who positioned themselves as the guide, not the hero. Why? Because psychologically, we're not looking for another hero. Jeb's campaign slogan before he called us 2 weeks before the South Carolina primary, and I almost told him it's too late, which it was, right? 2 months before the South Carolina primary, he spent millions of dollars making his campaign slogan, Jeb can fix it. Who's the hero? Jeb. What role do you play in that story? I don't know. I eat popcorn and watch, right? The biggest political upset in modern history, Hillary Clinton lost to Donald Trump. And by the way, Donald Trump didn't win in some kind of a landslide. He got less votes than Mitt Romney and still won the election. Why? Because Hillary couldn't get people to the polls. She couldn't stir up that passion. What was her campaign slogan? I'm with her. Not she's with us. I'm with her. It's about her. She's the hero in the story. The hero never gets chosen. Right? We're looking for a guide, not a hero. We want to express empathy. That's the first thing we do. The second thing we do to become the guide is we demonstrate competency or authority. We have to demonstrate that we know what we're doing. So the 1-2 punch is, I feel your pain and I can get you out. That's it. I feel your pain and I can get you out. A lot of people would say, well, Don, I don't know about this demonstrating competency. You know, millennials, they don't like you to browbeat them. They're really looking for you to kind of put your arm around them and go on the journey with them. It's not true. If a millennial goes to a nutritionist and says, I need to lose 30 pounds, and the nutritionist says, me too. Even a millennial knows they're at the wrong nutritionist. Well, we don't want to be overbearing, but we definitely need to know what we're doing, and we need to demonstrate it. So when your customer says, you know, we're really frustrated and scared about this, you might say something like, I understand that. A lot of my customers feel that way. I've helped about 500 customers get around that. What'd you just do? I feel your pain, and I can get you out. If you take one thing from this workshop, take that. Listen for pain points that your customers say to you and say, I feel that, I understand it. Or whenever they talk about an external problem of, we just hate having a backyard because we love dogs. We love having our dogs. We hate having a backyard. Tell me how it feels to, look out your backyard and not see a place for the dog. What does that feel like? You're just opening up your customer's heart at that point. And you're saying, I don't want that for you. Your dog and you deserve a great home. What did you just do? You offered to close the philosophical problem, right? We want to listen for these cues in our customers and position ourselves as a guide when we actually hear them. How do we position ourselves as a guide? Empathy and authority. Now, the next thing that we need to do on this journey that our customers are on is give them a plan. A plan. Here's the plan for solving your problem and getting you into a house. If you think about the customer journey so far, we identified something that they wanted. So that's a baby step, right? Then we identified 3 levels of problems, the external, internal, and philosophical problems that they have. That's 3 more baby steps. Then we expressed empathy and demonstrated competency. That's 2 more baby steps. And we are officially in a relationship with these people at this point. We are their guide. The problem is they're not going to place an order yet. And the reason is because the next step is for them to place an order. It's to buy a house from you. But that's the first step in this relationship that we've invited them into, in which they are vulnerable. They're at risk. They could lose money. They could feel stupid. They could make a bad decision. And especially when it's as confusing and there's so much risk involved in buying a house. So it's not a baby step. It's a yawning chasm to get them to the other side. And this is where most people are actually going to stop. And the reason they're going to stop is they're going to feel a sense of fog or confusion. And they're not going to step into it. You don't have that fog. You don't even see it because you know how everything works. And they don't. But they're not going to say to you, because they don't understand this is happening, they're not going to say, this process has gotten a little bit confusing, and I feel at risk. I feel at financial risk, and so I'm not going to do this. What they're actually going to say is, something doesn't feel right. I'm going to kick the can on this. I'll get back to it later. And you know what that means. That means you've lost the sale. We're trying to find, my company is growing, and we're trying to find commercial property in Nashville, Tennessee right now. And this is the 4th building that I've looked at. Haven't placed offers on them, but I've gotten pretty close. And it always comes to this point where it's like, ugh, this is confusing. We're looking at a 140-year-old firehouse right now that StoryBrand can move into, and it's a historic building, and so I'm kind of going, if I replace a toilet, does that mean I'm going to spend $500,000 replacing every pipe and not touching the outside of it? I have no idea what the answers to those questions are. But if my commercial real estate agent would say, hey, Don, this is how we're going to do this. This is a 140-year-old firehouse. So phase 1 is we're going to go through just an inspection period, and we're going to find out everything that could possibly go wrong with this firehouse that might cost you money later on. Phase 2, we're actually going to put together a financial package and make sure that you're really comfortable with it, so you're not out over your skis in terms of debt to revenue ratio. And third, if you want, we'll execute it and we'll sign that paperwork together. But it's going to be a really peaceful process, and things are going to be really clear, and you'll never feel at risk. If somebody would say that to me, I'd have bought a building a long time ago. But instead, they say, it's a good building. Property value should continue to climb. You should get it. And I'm sitting there going, all I see is fog. Do you understand how that works? So you would actually say, you would find out your customer's problem, or you'd have a standard 3-step plan. Step 1 is we're going to find a house that really works right for you. Step 2, we're going to analyze your finances and figure out whether or not you can afford it. Step 3, we're going to execute. We're going to get you into a house. Now think about it. If I'm at a cocktail party and I meet 2 financial advisors, and the first financial advisor I meet, I say, what do you do? They say, I'm a financial advisor. The market is really volatile right now. We could be on the brink of a trade war, but I can probably get you through it. Let's meet next Thursday. Bring your checkbook. Probably not going to take that step. You meet the second financial advisor and they say, the market is really volatile right now. We're probably on the brink of a trade war. I know I can get you through it. I work with customers in 3 ways. The first phase is we sit and we just talk about your dreams and your goals and what you want to do, what you want to accomplish with life, and your philosophy of money. I want to understand you. Second, I'm going to give you a custom strategy that you can execute without even dealing with me. Just some tips on where you are and what I think you should be doing with your money. And phase 3 is I'm going to hold your hand and help you execute if you want to take that step. And we'll do this for the rest of your life, so you'll feel financially sound and won't have to worry about money. Which one are you going with? Person 1 or person 2? You're going with person 2. And here's the trick. Person 1 was going to do the same thing. They just never spelled it out. And because they never spelled it out, the customer never saw a path they could walk down, and so they didn't walk down the path. I mean, if you come to the edge of a wood and you want to go on a big hike, and there's a path through one set of woods and no path through the other, which one are 99.99% of people going to go down? The one with the path. And so when we give customers a plan, we create a path for them to walk down. It's really, really important that sometime early in a conversation with a client, you actually spell out, here are the 3 phases of doing business with me. Main reason is, at that point, remember we're at this point where there's this yawning chasm of risk. You've just put 3 more baby steps into the relationship that are risk-free. And so they are much more likely to take those steps rather than walk into that confusion. The next thing that we need to do in a story and in business is call our customers to action in a very clear and distinct way. This means we've got to tell our customers what to do next. And it needs to be really clear. Here is our next step. We don't have any meetings around my office unless we walk out going, what's the next step? What is everybody supposed to do? Because it gives people marching orders. Everything else is just philosophy. That means on your website, in the top right, there should be a schedule an appointment button or a buy now button. If there's not, you're losing sales. And these guys at Curator know the way the eye works on a website. They actually heat map these things. And it moves into either a Z pattern or an F pattern. It goes from top left to top right. And at the top right, it should say schedule an appointment or buy now. We tend to use a lot of passive language in selling, and especially on websites. Things like learn more or get started. That's passive language. And we think what we're doing is we're saying, I'm a real estate agent. I can probably really help you out. And I don't want to bother you. I don't want to be a hostile salesperson. I don't want to always be closing. I don't want to be that guy. But I do sell real estate. We think we're being polite, but that's not what our customer is hearing. What our customer is hearing is, I'm a real estate agent. I don't actually believe I'm very good at it. I don't think I can resolve your problems, but I have a mortgage, so if you want to give me some charity and do some work with me, I'd be happy with that. That's what they're hearing. And when we use passive language rather than buy now or schedule an appointment or let me get you into a home, right? We are initiating the action when we do that. Ladies, if you were at a cocktail party back when you were single and some man walked up to you and said, learn more, would you be remotely interested in that guy, right? Or worse, get started? No. We are not going to get started. We have to say something like, I got married for the first time at 42, so I learned the hard way. But you have to say something like, can I take you on a date? Can I take you on a date? Give somebody something to accept or reject, and they're very clear about what is happening here. There's no confusion. And so we want a direct call to action that works like that. I want to get you into a home. Let's schedule an appointment. Do you have time next week? And those kinds of, we talk about closing, and you think of closing almost as a way of strong-arming people. That's not what good closers do. Good closers are just very clear. Here's our next step. Would you like to take that step or not? That's all closing really is. Then we need two more things in our what we call a brand script. We need two things to close out this story. We need to have a vision of what success would look like in our customer's life. We need to have a vision of success. I think the images on your website should be, of course, the houses that you're selling, but also just happy people having experienced your service. I review websites all the time, and they'll have a picture of their building on the website. And I'm like, are you selling your building? Then why is there a picture of your building on your website? Show me smiley, happy people happy with your service. Because people head toward a vision of success. And so we want to actually, it's a great idea. This is called a brand script. I'm going to show you a piece of software that's completely free that you can create, you can use online. You can actually fill out a brand script for every single customer that you have. And you know what they want, and what their external problem is, and how it's making them feel, and why that's just plain wrong, and how you can be empathetic to them and demonstrate how you can get them out of that, and you've given them the 3-step plan just to make sure you've communicated an entire narrative to every client that you're interacting with. And the big part of that at the end is success. This is the climactic scene in my customer's life. This is what they want. I think if you guys, some of you are struggling with social media, how to use social media, what to do with social media, what I would do with social media is I would just continually tell stories about climactic scenes. The Joneses got into this dream house, and they were able to do it 2 years ahead of schedule because I worked with them. Here's a picture of them, of the three of us in front of their dream house. If you just keep ringing that bell, what are you saying to the community? You're saying you're somebody who gets people to a climactic scene in a story. My friend Dave Ramsey in Nashville, Tennessee, is an awesome guy, and he's got the biggest house on the biggest hill, and it's all debt-free right there in Nashville. And the way he did that, one of the main reasons that he got there are hundreds of thousands of financial advisors in the country. Thousands of them have written books. Hundreds of those have radio shows or podcasts. And if you want to name one financial advisor on the street, it's going to be Dave Ramsey. How did he do it? An extremely clear narrative. Dave doesn't give financial advice, he gives financial peace. Financial advice is not the resolution of a conflict. Financial peace is the resolution of a conflict. And then he'll have you on the radio show. He's got a great villain. The external problem is credit card debt. It's making you feel like your life is out of control. And it's wrong for credit cards to rip you off. What did you just do? External, internal, philosophical problem. And what's the climactic scene where we mark the resolution of these external, internal, philosophical problems? It's the debt-free scream that he does on his radio show. So couples come on and they scream, I'm debt-free, and Dave loves on them and says, you paid off $50,000 in 3 years. What's he doing? He's visually and audibly demonstrating a climactic scene in a customer's life, and 3 million listeners on the radio hear that and say, I want that too. So what would it look like for you to actually frame in your social media the resolution of external, internal, and philosophical problem and repeat it so we're branding in people's brains, if I want to live this story with this great climactic scene, I've got to do business with Jake or Joan or whoever. We want to paint a picture of our customer's success, and we want to celebrate that success. We also need to paint a picture of what it will look like if you don't do business with me. There has to be stakes in the story. If nothing can be lost, if I don't do business with you, I'm not going to do business with you. Let's say Liam Neeson gets a call, and it's a terrible call. Your daughter has actually been kidnapped. Liam, she is strapped to a bomb in a warehouse, and you've got to come and disarm that bomb. There's only one piece of good news. The bomb is full of baby powder. If it goes off, she's going to have baby powder in her hair. She's going to smell nice, but she's probably going to sneeze. You don't want that to happen. And there's 90 minutes of Liam Neeson trying to disarm a baby powder bomb. Is that movie interesting? There's a reason it's not interesting. You remove the stakes from the story. And so as you interact with clients, as you begin to say, yeah, we definitely want to get you out of that school district. We want to get you into a much better school district. What do you keep reminding them of? You keep reminding them of there are stakes in this story. There are stakes in the story. There's a penalty for not doing this in your life. Now, these are the 7 things that make up a really good story. You'll see all 7 in almost every movie that you go see from here on till eternity. And I think these are the 7 categories in which your customers have concerns. I look at this in 2 ways. The first is like a recipe for a loaf of bread. And what I mean by that is they're not equal parts. Success is like flour. You're going to put cups and cups of flour. You're going to talk about what a vision of their life can look like all the time. Failure, though, is like salt. You just need a pinch of it. If you keep, I talk about this in the book. There's some studies that show how far you can go with negative messaging. And at some point, people begin to tune out. They won't pay attention. They'll go into denial. That's why you'll go to the doctor, and they'll say, we got to do something about your high blood pressure. And an hour later, you're thinking about it over a slice of pizza, right? You just go into denial a little bit. So they're not equal parts. I also look at it like chords on a guitar. These are 7 chords. And I really just taught you, probably very uncomfortably, how to play these 7 chords. It's not going to be natural to you unless you practice, but I taught you the 7 chords. And with these 7 chords, you can write an infinite number of songs. Taylor Swift uses 7 chords, and she sells 1 million records. She changes boyfriends, and she uses 7 chords to sell 1 million more. But these chords are the difference between music and noise. And a lot of us have been just spitting noise into the atmosphere for a long time, and I think it's time that we make music, because people understand music. Music and noise are very, very similar. Noise is just sound waves traveling through the air, rattling your inner eardrum. They're completely silent. You're actually not even hearing my voice right now. You're hearing a facsimile of my voice that your eardrums is creating. My voice is actually completely silent. That's what noise is. But if I played for you a recording of a dump truck backing up and birds chirping and children laughing, you would not remember what I played for you a month from now. I could call you and say, do you remember I played for you a recording? And you would say, Don, I do remember that. I think it was just noise, right? But if we were to take a Beatles song and play it for you, a month from now, you might be able to hum the tune of that song. You might even be able to remember some of the lyrics of that song. Why? Because noise is processed in the brain differently. Well, what's the difference between music and noise? Music is noise submitted to rules. Music is noise submitted to rules. And if you disobey those rules, you descend into noise and people no longer process the information. These, in my opinion, and it's a strong opinion, these are the rules of messaging and marketing. And if you break these rules, you're going to descend into noise. Jeb Bush descended into noise. Hillary Clinton Trump was going to make America great again, so Hillary Clinton offered a volume discount. She offered us 120 things she was going to do with the country. That's called noise. And nobody could actually get their head around it or process it or get passionate about it. Your advantage in the marketplace, especially going into a plateau in real estate or maybe even a downward turn here in the next few years, your secret advantage will be clarity. You will play music and everybody else will play noise, and they will remember you and they won't remember somebody else. Or, heaven forbid, vice versa. An inferior real estate agent who can't get them into a house that they like, who doesn't know the market as well, will actually get the business because they played music when you played noise. People don't buy the best products and services, they buy the ones they can understand the fastest. And I'd like to change that. I'd like to see the best real estate agents also become the best communicators. And what we're really talking about here is just understanding how human beings work. Just understanding that everybody wants to be invited into a story. So let's look at the 7 questions that we really want to ask in order to clarify our message. The first is, have we defined something the character wants, the customer wants? Have we defined it clearly? Next, have we defined the problem our customers face? The external, internal, and philosophical problem. Then have we positioned ourselves as the guide in our customer's life with empathy and authority? Have we spelled out a simple plan our customers can follow, preferably a 3-step plan? And I'd like to see this visually demonstrated on your website. Have we clearly called our customers to action? Have we painted a vision of our customers' success? And have we defined what's at stake for our customers? I'll step aside if you want to take a picture of that, feel free. I think these are the only 7 questions our customers are actually asking. I think anything else is just noise. It's just noise. If we can just, whenever we're with a customer, and it'll just become second nature for you as you practice this, just play the guitar. Every time you're with them, just talk about these 7 things. It's all in the book, Building a Story Brand. I don't make money off this book. I get $3 a book, and it goes to a scholarship fund at Lipscomb University for underserved kids who are showing entrepreneurial instincts. And hopefully they'll be with you someday selling real estate, right? But if you get the book, it'll lead you to a piece of software at mystorybrand.com. And you can actually clarify your message right there on that piece of software. It will prompt you, and there's even little videos that you can watch that will help illustrate and explain each of the 7 parts of the framework. All right, I want to break this down into practical steps here because I know you guys are all here to think about your marketing and your messaging. So I want to be able to look at a website and say, this is how a clear message translates into a piece of marketing collateral. The very first thing that your website needs to do is pass the grunt test. Now, I call it the grunt test tongue-in-cheek, and what I mean by that is, if I had a laptop and I opened that laptop to your website and put that laptop on the lap of a caveman, would the caveman know what you offer in a very quick period of time? In order to do that, we have to know, see, there's our caveman. We have to know whether or not he can answer 3 questions. The first is, what do you offer? So if you say trust is the commodity we exchange, I don't know what you offer. I've literally reviewed websites before and been 10 minutes in before I could figure out what they sold, because they kept talking about their grandfather and clever sayings and all this kind of stuff. There's a wonderful woman named Stephanie Ingram in Nashville, Tennessee, and she is the 1st and 3rd wealthiest person in Tennessee. I don't know how that works, but she is. She has billions of dollars. She had this incredible heart to do something that I'll explain in a second, so she started a business to do that thing. She met with the most expensive ad agency in Nashville, Tennessee, and that ad agency sat around with her and said, Stephanie, this is such a huge part of your heart. The branding needs to reflect you. Well, that's a huge mistake, isn't it? And they said, tell us about yourself. What's your favorite color? What's your favorite song? And they came across a poem that Stephanie has always loved, and there's a line in that poem that says this, something, 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 a well-placed smile. And she said, it's just one of my favorite little things I've ever heard. And they said, Stephanie, your business should be called Well-Placed Smile. Well, you tell me, if a business is called Well-Placed Smile, what do they do? Yeah, a dentist, right? It's an executive training center. How do you think that business did? Did terribly. No. And years in, I mean, I'm thinking at this point you should sue the design agency who gave you that nonsense, because you actually paid them hundreds of thousands of dollars to confuse the public. I don't know what you offer, right? So she built this huge building to do executive training. It didn't work, and now it's an event space. It's an event rental space, and she's changed the name, thankfully. I actually brought her into the room once to secretly stand as I did just what I did to you. And she walked out going, they think we're a dentist, right? We need to know what you offer. Next thing, I need to know how it will make my life better. So it's not just that you can get somebody into a dream home. You can get somebody in a dream home so that they can what? so that they can experience peace, so that they can love where they live, right? So I know you can get me into a house and it will make my life better in this way, because that's really what I'm buying. And the third thing is super easy. I just need to know, what do I need to do to buy it? So I need to schedule an appointment, not learn more or get started. I need to schedule an appointment. This is what your website should do within 5 seconds. You have 5 seconds to say, here's what we offer, here's how it will make your life better, and here's what you need to do to buy it. Do you pass the grunt test? Now here's what you can do. You have to kind of workshop this, A/B test this. It's an evolving thing. And so, and I know you've got tools that help you edit the text on your website right here in the room. Those are fantastic tools. You actually want to sit down at Starbucks with an acquaintance, maybe somebody who doesn't exactly know what you do. You want to show them your website for 5 seconds. And then you want to close the website. And you want to say, okay, I'm going to ask you 3 questions. What do I offer? And if they can't answer, you need to go back and change the words. Right? Okay, they know what you offer. How will it make my life better? And if they can't answer, you need to change the words on your website. And then once you get through those first 2, you ask the third one. And what would you need to do if you wanted to do business with me? Oh, well, I remember there was a bright orange button that said schedule an appointment. Okay, great. And once they can answer those 3 questions without thinking, your message is clear. Your message is crystal clear. All right? Let's look at how this works on a good and bad website. This is a bad website. We review these all the time. I didn't want to throw anybody under the bus, so we just made a website. I don't know what the name of this company is. That's their logo. There's no tagline, so they don't tell me what they do. And the eye actually is fascinating. The eye goes from here to here, across here, and down across the bottom in under a second. That's what the eye does on a website. A lot of us will put a big giant paragraph right here. Well, nobody's reading a paragraph, and you put a giant paragraph right here on your website, you're actually saying to customers, you're going to have to climb a mountain to understand what it is I offer, and they're not going to do it. So let's look at what this actually communicates. It communicates nothing. And then you scroll across. Every button here, it looks exactly the same. So what you've told me is there's no priority on what button I should press. And then right here is your dominant real estate is right here. This is the most valuable real estate on the website. Okay? And then I come down across the bottom, and we've got a goofy saying that says, your journey starts here. What in the world does that mean? I have no idea. Maybe it's a hiking company. Who knows? Then artisan innovative solutions, words that sound like they mean something but don't. Actually, it was in front of 1,500 sales reps for a software company, and when I got to this website, there was a massive amount of giggling that took place, and I kind of made a mental note of that, went and looked at their website later, and they actually had 2 of these words on there. And then, of course, our favorites, learn more and get started. And right here, where there's some great real estate, we've got nothing. Right? And then I go back to the top right, and their call to action is why start? Why start indeed? All right, let's look at a company that we made up, and I'll show you how a really great website actually works. This is an e-bike company. Anybody ever ridden an electric bicycle? Raise your hand if you're. They're so fun. You got to get on one soon. Betsy and I were in Portland, Oregon last summer, and we got on e-bikes, and we absolutely loved it. It's the illusion of exercise. You just ride around. You're not burning any calories, but you feel like you are. And I got so cocky, I would trash talk people. You know, like, hey, what's wrong with you? You can't keep up. You're on an e-bike. It's like a motorcycle. All right, so let's look at the Z pattern. Starts with circuit e-bikes. We bounce off the top right. This is where we find a dealer. I know what you want me to do. Notice what's not here. Frequently asked questions, about, contact us, pictures of my cat. Why would I give people a bunch of decisions when I really only wanted to make one decision? Now, if you go to StoryBrand's website, we actually have some of this stuff up here, but I wanted to illustrate, this needs to be a different color. It needs to be really, really obvious, right? We don't want to confuse people. Then we scroll across the middle, and I've got be the leader of the pack. Now, this is interesting. I'm selling an e-bike, right? But that's not what I'm really selling. What I'm really selling is what the e-bike can get you. That's where the real value is. None of us actually sell real estate. We sell what real estate can get somebody. And so when we actually spell out what it can get somebody, we increase the value, the perceived value of the product. So how much would I pay for an e-bike? I might pay a couple $1,000s. How much would you pay to be the leader of the pack in your community? I might pay $4,000, right? We just up the perceived value of the product when we spelled out what it is that you actually get. And then we spell it again. It's an e-bike. We're selling a bike. So I've got bike, call to action, aspirational identity right here. And then across the bottom, I just call this a value stack. 3 more things that you can get. You'll save the environment and save money and save time. Now when you say, what do you offer? We offer an e-bike that gets you the leader of the pack, saves the environment, saves money, saves time. There are 5 things that I offer in less words than a tweet. That's music. Now, this is a positive vision for our customer's life. But the way story normally works is you have Jason Bourne and everything is going really great. That's scene 1. And in scene 2, terrible things happen. And whatever stabilized life Jason Bourne was experiencing is taken away from him. So stories work in positive scene, negative scene, positive scene, negative scene, positive scene, negative scene. And we want to follow a similar formula on our website. So I scroll down one place on the website. Up here at the very top, we've got how great life can be, and now we're going to take it away from them. Your life could be really great, but it's not. You're stuck in traffic. Life is too short to sit in traffic. That's the philosophical problem. Traffic is the external problem. Traffic is no fun. That's the internal problem. Don't be held back. That's an internal problem. You were designed for more. That's a philosophical problem. So we've got external, internal, philosophical all demonstrated in very little text. And a button that offers to close all 3 levels of problem. Again, we're not even to the point, we haven't even used words on this website that would fill a tweet yet. And we're already through section 2. Then we want to position ourselves as the guide. Now that we've invited them into the story, we want to position ourselves as the person who can actually help them. We don't just care about bikes, we care about you. That's empathy. I'll tell you where you can get this website later if you want to review it. But we don't just care about bikes, we care about you. That's empathy. And again, I think this is the 4th, if not 5th time I've actually called them to action with a different colored button, and there's no other clutter here. And then once I demonstrate empathy or express empathy, I can demonstrate competency. More than 20,000 happy riders, more than 5 million gallons of gas saved, more than 100,000 commute hours saved. This is the 1-2 punch. Empathy and authority. Empathy and a demonstration of competency. Here's where I position myself as the guide. Now, if you have divisions of your company or a bunch of houses for people to look at, this is where you would do that. But now we've actually framed the houses or framed the products as something that closes and it gets you 5 things you want and closes 3 levels of story loops. So now the houses actually make sense. Now, when I click on any of these, I would go to the same formula as I experienced above. We're going to just repeat the exact formula for each of our products. And what part of the brand script is this? It's the plan. Because getting into an e-bike sounds really complicated. But visually, when I see this part of the website, I say to myself, this isn't going to be very difficult. This looks like it's actually going to be really easy to get into an e-bike. I spoke in front of about 1,500 Trek retailers, Trek bicycle retailers. And they said, Don, what's the number one thing we need to do to sell more bicycles at Christmas? I said, well, there's a lot of things that you need to do. But if every retailer in this room painted on the side of your walls, get fitted, find a bike that you love, and be on the road this weekend, you would sell a lot more bikes. And here's why. Because some 55-year-old guy has busted his knee, and the doctor says, you need to stop running. I want you to get on a bicycle. Walks into a bike shop. Everybody in the bike shop is wearing some weird shoes. They're clicking around. They're wearing spandex. They're going to be intimidated as heck. And then they actually look at the price of the bike, and it costs as much as a Hyundai, right? They're walking out of that bike shop unless on the wall is something that basically visually says, you can join this community. It's really easy. Step 1, step 2, step 3. And then every sales rep in that store needs to say, hey, here's how we get you on a bike, just so you know. That way, even if the person walks out, they already know the first step that they need to take. And it's the same with real estate. We just want to say, hey, here's how I work with you. And you give them the 3 steps. Next, how many of you are collecting email addresses currently? Great. Every hand in the room should go up. You really want to start collecting email addresses. And then once you get those email addresses, you want to take them through an automated email system where they get 8 or 10 emails from you, and you slowly position yourself as the guide and invite them into a story in those emails. That way, when you actually meet with somebody, they've already been invited into the story. All your messaging points have already been downloaded into their brain, and you can start much, much quicker. And the way people actually want your email address is they will give you an email address in exchange for valuable information. They don't want your newsletter. Nobody wants your newsletter. How many newsletters have you subscribed to in the last 10 years? Then why do you think anybody would want yours, right? You could actually put together a PDF on your website that says how to floss your cat's teeth. And you will get more email addresses from that PDF than you will from your newsletter. We want to give them something that's really, really valuable. And then we start emailing them after that. And then finally, the most important part of your website is the junk drawer. And the reason the junk drawer is so important is because it's where everything that you thought was important will go. And this website will actually work. You know, I was just with yesterday a client. Her name is Amy. She runs a company called Cauliflower Foods. She sells cauliflower pizza crust. And before she came to StoryBrand, she had done negative $250,000. This is 2 years ago. Negative $250,000. And she had a company, she had some investors, she had a company that wanted to charge her $25,000 a month or something like that to do her marketing. And she said, Don, I just wanted to come here and clarify our message first. She clarified our message with us. She placed one ad with that clear message and did $124,000 the next week. That year she did $6 million. So she went from $250,000 down to $6 million, and she never hired the marketing company. And then this year, she told me yesterday, Don, our third year in business, it looks like we're going to go over $20 million in business. And it all just became really obvious why. Because instead of saying, we have cauliflower pizza crust, she would say things like, we know you want to stay on a healthy paleo diet, but you hate the fact that you can't eat pizza. That's a problem, right? We have a pizza crust made of cauliflower that tastes amazing. That's the resolution of a problem. Go down to Costco and buy it today. That's what do you offer, how will it make my life better, and what do I need to do to buy it? And she just focused on clarity, and $20 million later, she's doing super great. She actually hopes to sell the company. All right, I want to give you one tool before we leave. I've only got about 8 minutes left, and then we're going to do some Q&A. I think Jimmy's going to come. We're going to do some Q&A. But I want to give you one tool that will help you not confuse your customer. If you don't take any of my advice, I want you to actually write a sentence today that will get you business. So when somebody says, what do you do? I want you to give them one sentence that will really help your business grow. And I call this sentence the one-liner. The one-liner. This is the applicable tool that you can use to get your investment back from your time here in Boston. One-liner is a sentence that gets people interested. It comes out of the movie industry, like so much of the stuff that we do. And the one-liner is what a screenwriter will use to sell producers on his screenplay. It's the one sentence that gets a producer to buy it. And then later, when you're actually deciding what movie you want to go see, you're scrolling through your phone, you read that one sentence, and that one sentence makes you want to go see that movie, okay? And if people don't understand very quickly what that movie is about, or why they should go see it, they won't go see it no matter how good the movie is. Let me give you an example of that. 2 years ago, a movie won the Academy Award for Best Picture. It was called Moonlight. Raise your hand if you've seen the movie Moonlight. That's about 4% of the room. It's 96% of people didn't see it, and it was the best movie of the year. Why? Didn't have a good one-liner. It was very hard to understand what the movie was going to be about. And people do not walk into a fog. They won't do it. Meanwhile, we'll go see a movie with The Rock, and we know we're going to love it because last year The Rock took on an earthquake and won, and this year he's going to take on a skyscraper and win. And I don't have to burn any calories to understand that. So what can we say to our customers that gets them interested? Okay, there are 3 parts to this sentence. The first part is the problem. The first thing out of your mouth when somebody says, what do you do, should not be, I'm a real estate agent. The first thing should be, well, you know how most people aren't fully satisfied with the house they're living in? That's the first thing that we say. And the person listening goes, yes. And you say, well, I'm a real estate agent. I specialize in helping people find a home that they'll love. Right? So it's you want to open with the problem. The problem starts the story. You know, a buddy of mine gave a TED Talk recently, and I went over to hear him and cheer him on. Happened to get there an hour early, and I had to suffer through about 3 horrible TED Talks. And it's people who walk to the middle of the stage and say, I'm so-and-so, and blah, 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 and they just go on about their lives, and they don't get to the point. What you need to do if you give a talk is walk to the center of the stage and say, we have a serious problem. And everybody leans in. Now there's a reason for me to pay attention because you're going to resolve a problem. It will work with you in one-on-one relationships all the time. When you say, you know, most people really aren't satisfied with the house they're living in, or you can say that 50 million different ways. There's not a right way to say it, but you want to illustrate a problem, right? And then now, when you illustrate a problem, and then you want to talk about yourself as the resolution to the problem. You are the product or the solution to the problem. I resolved that problem with this. That makes you useful in your customer's life. And really, I don't mean to say that we're all utilitarian. We all have great unconditional relationships. The average person has about 12 really good, strong friendships. Outside of that, you're mostly a guide to people. And when you're a guide to people, they're actually saying, how are you useful to me? And when you say, I'm useful to solve this problem, they say, I'm going to remember that. If I ever have that problem, or if anybody has that problem, I know now to call you because that's why you are useful. So we start with the problem, and then we actually position ourselves as the solution to that problem, and then we paint a picture of the result. What does life look like after this problem is resolved? You know, a lot of people don't like where they live. They're not satisfied with their home. I'm a real estate agent, but I specialize in really understanding families and the kind of house that they need to live in so that they're completely happy and they don't sit around wishing they lived somewhere else. That's part 1, part 2, and part 3. And it's just called a one-liner. And you want to create this one-liner, and you want to shop it, you want to workshop it, you want to test it with people, you want to really get it right. And there's some things you want to do with that one-liner. One thing is you want to put it on your website. The website I showed you didn't have an explanatory paragraph, but it's just a long series of paragraphs that explain what you do. That's where you get your search engine optimization. That explanatory paragraph needs to start with a one-liner. It needs to start with that. I would print the one-liner, first of all, get it short. Shorten it. Whatever you write, cut it in half, right? Get it short, short, short. Don't use clever prose language, use street language. If it sounds weird coming out of your mouth at a cocktail party, don't say it. I want you to print it on the back of your business card. So on the front of your business card, you have that you're a real estate agent, but on the back, you've spelled out the problem, the solution, and the result. You basically told a little bitty short story or invited somebody to experience a little bitty short story on the back of your business card. Then make it your email signature. Make it your email signature. Every one of your team members, it needs to be their email signature too. If you happen to work at a firm where you have a team, I want you to write it on the whiteboard of that firm. And when you gather everybody around, don't tell them you went to some conference and you just say, hey, we've all been talking about the company using different language. I think we need to get on the same page. When somebody asks what we do, I want to say this, right? And then go down to the bank and get $105 bills and wrap them up in a rubber band. And just like a mob boss say, hold that up and say, for the next 3 months, when I ask you what you do, what we do here, if you answer with this sentence, I'm going to give you $5. And just gamify the process of getting everybody in your team to memorize the one statement. And all of you want to say it in the exact same way every single time. It's just good branding. You will convert your entire sales team, or your entire team into a sales team, from the CEO all the way to the janitor. You know, I want to end this talk how I began it. And I just want to say this. If you confuse, you'll lose. Everybody is searching for clarity. And you know, we live in a world where I think too many of the wrong people have the microphone. Too many of the wrong people have a really clear message. And I think you should have a clear message. People want to be taken somewhere. It's one of the greatest leadership lessons I ever learned. I was traveling with my friend Bob Goff. We were traveling with all sorts of dignitaries and really influential folks. We'd planned a little retreat for them. And there was a 6-hour space on one of those days where Bob came to me and said, hey, Don, what are we going to do with everybody? What are we going to do with them? And I said, let's just give them the day off, right? I mean, these are intense people. We're in a beautiful place. Let's give them the day off. And Bob looked at me and he said, Don, people want to be taken somewhere. It doesn't even matter where. They just want to be taken somewhere. So what if we go get in the boats and go over to this waterfall and just ask a really inspirational question over there? They want to be taken somewhere. You know, everybody in this room is a leader. I mean, you're running a company, you're a self-starter, you're accountable, you serve. And I think people want to be taken somewhere. And if we stop thinking about our jobs as, I'm a real estate agent, I sell people houses, to I take people to the house of their dreams. I take people to better school zones. I take people to where they can live as a family in peace and harmony rather than stress. I want to take you somewhere. We need to stop telling our stories and start inviting people into a story. And when you clarify your message, you'll see a massive difference in the way people respond to you. Thank you so much. Jimmy.
All right.
Thank you.
Great stuff, John. Thank you so much.
Do we have time for a few questions?
Yeah, we do. And first off, guys, how many people here are going to change their website as soon as you leave the room right now?
Good.
Right? We're back there stage, like writing notes. We're going to change our stuff too. Well, the first thing, Don, as you're talking through this, I have so many ideas that came to my mind. The first one is in regards to, we had a question from Mark Carr, who I don't think is in the room right now. He struggles with this basic concept, which is he helps people buy homes, he helps people sell homes,
right.
He helps people, invest in properties. He's trying to find a way to unify the 4 or 5 different services under one umbrella.
Yep.
And unfortunately what happens is when you try to do that, it ends up in that area you talked about, which is generic and nondescript.
Yep.
So how do you find that balance between I do more than just this one thing, and how do you make sure that that high level message doesn't become basically indecipherable?
Great. Well, I actually talk about this in the book. I don't mean to keep pitching the book because there's not a 1-minute answer to this question. But what you need to do is you need to actually find an umbrella offering that everything fits inside of. Mm-hmm. And so, I talked about my friend Dave Ramsey. Dave has Business Boutique, which is a massive conference for women who are starting companies. He's got Entree Leadership
Yep.
for young business leaders. He's got Financial Peace University. He's got board games. He's got multiple personalities, not him, but personalities in his deal, who are doing all sorts of things. But he found one umbrella thing that everything fits under, and that's financial peace.
Yeah.
So when you think about what he didn't do, was he didn't go in and say, well, I'm going to do financial advice and also I'm going to do plumbing. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. Everything fits. So as long as you can fit everything, so buying and selling a home are actually pretty easy. They all fit under the same idea of real estate shouldn't be a nightmare.
Is it more about being philosophical, meaning, and not in the sense where you're speaking in philosophical terms, but having a strong enough belief where you can communicate that belief in a clear way, which encompasses all the services you offer? Yes,
but you still want to be clear.
Okay.
You still want to be crystal clear. And so you still want to say something like, buying or selling a home shouldn't be a nightmare, right? Mm-hmm. Or something like that. Nightmare is a pretty strong negative word. I might not use that. But then you would have, just like those bikes down there, you would have, I'd like to buy a home, or I'd like to sell a home. When I click, I'd like to buy a home, I'm going to a whole other brand script. So I've actually created 2 brand scripts. One is for buying a home, and one is for selling a home.
Yeah.
If I'm a loan officer, I've got a brand script for people who want to get a loan directly from me, and I've got a brand script for real estate agents who I want to recommend me.
Yeah.
Those are 2 completely different needs, and I'm going to speak to them in completely different ways. So when you segment your audience, you're going to create a brand script for each of them, and an umbrella brand script that all those segmented audiences can fit under.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I think, how many people here are familiar with the phrase, there is no finish line? Do you know what brand that was? Well, you're familiar with Just Do It, because that was Nike's saying before they had their saying. And I think the reason I point that out is because we have a group of tinkers. Everybody here wants to change everything all the time. That's true, right? I'm speaking about myself too a little bit, right? If it doesn't immediately have that impact where everyone starts talking about us, we're going to just change it. And the message I kept hearing from you, Don, was consistency, repetition, getting your team to buy into it, turn your team into your salespeople. How long do you need to wait before you figure out you've either got there is no finish line or just do it?
Well, you do want to A/B test before you stick with something. Mm-hmm. And so the way we do marketing at my company is I will typically wireframe a website. Mm-hmm. My designer will lay it out. He'll show it to me in prototype. And I typically cut 30% of the words at that point. Because once I see it visually, I realize, oh, I wrote way more words. I'm a writer, right?
Yeah.
I wrote way more words than I need to. We cut that down. Then we launch that website. 30 days later, we do another what we call a war room day, where we sit around and we talk about how it's doing. And we try to improve upon it. At the moment we improve upon it and we see a decrease in sales, we go back and we don't touch it again.
Yeah, I got you.
And then we run it for years.
You guys with us on that? This idea of sort of being willing to wait and be patient?
But I really like the inclination of tinkering at first and then letting it ride. And a message really, if you have a bad message and you take my advice, you'll see a dramatic difference very quickly.
Yeah.
But if you actually have a pretty good message and you hone it to make it even better, you won't see the dramatic results. You'll just see slight results, right? I think it takes a message 3 years to actually develop roots in the community.
Yeah.
So you've got to repeat it and keep it the same for 3 years and keep repeating it because it takes that long for people to actually know what you offer, right? It takes a long time for you to get positioned in their brain. And if you keep changing the message, you're just starting the 3 years over again.
Yeah, and after reading your book and listening to your podcast, one of the things that struck me, at least, one of the things I did, is I started thinking about what was the language my customers used to describe our service.
It's a great way to go about it.
Yeah, and so I'd start, because you said it earlier, we tend to overcomplicate it. We tend to add words like innovation and disruption into it, but what are they actually saying? So on that note, when you think about this idea of problems, because that's one of the elements of the StoryBrand framework, is identifying problems and communicating how you're going to solve that problem as the guide. How do you know the problem's big enough?
How do you know what problem is big enough?
How do you know if the problem you're trying to solve is actually big enough? In other words, there's a company called Juicero. You guys may have seen this. They raised like $100 million in capital, and they basically took a bag of juice and they compressed it. It was a $700 juice compressor. And they did an article on Wired where the reporter basically pulled the bag out and squeezed it with his hands and did the exact same thing. And the company basically went out of business within 90 days of doing so. So squeezing juice into a bottle really isn't a problem people are trying to solve. So how do you know if you're identifying the problems in your business, are they big enough for you to put the emphasis on it?
Well, the biggest way is, are people buying it, right? When you put it out there, are people actually buying it? If I were in your shoes, one of the things that I would do pretty quickly is I would begin to, and this is going to sound so simple, might even laugh, but you need to associate your name with buying a home. Right? And so I would put, early on, maybe 7 years ago, I sat down with a buddy of mine named Henry Cloud. He's a psychologist. And he said, Don, do you realize that you are the guy on Story? Well, Jimmy, I didn't know I was the guy on Story. I'd been speaking about Story, I'd written about Story, but I had always thought Robert McKee and Blake Snyder and Christopher Booker were the guys on Story. And I realized, my goodness, I'm the guy on Story. And what I actually noticed was a few of my associates, people who kind of do what I do, were watching me, and they began to talk about Story and business. And it bothered me because they'd never run a business and they'd never written a screenplay. They didn't know about Story. And so I actually said, you know what, I'm going to, forgive me for being crass, I'm going to pee around my territory here. And I wrote a PDF called How to Tell a Story by Donald Miller. And I put Story really big and my name really big because I wanted to own Story. And when I did that, my competition went away. And they went and chased other things because they realized Don's going to be the guy on Story. Well, what you want to do is how to buy a house without getting ripped off by so-and-so. And now what have you just done with your name? You've become the person who tells you how to buy a house without getting ripped off. Where if you said real estate solutions, forget it.
Yeah.
Forget it. You'll never be remembered. Nobody has real estate problems.
Yeah, it's funny.
Does that make sense?
No, it does, because it ties in perfectly. If you guys remember Chris's keynote this morning, how Chris talked about how important the personal brand actually is. Now, we hired Don Miller because we loved his message. And I read StoryBrand, and then I fell in love with Don Miller. And they became sort of interchangeable. Like, I didn't really know where it sort of left off and began. So it's sort of an interesting idea that you want to fuse yourself, am I hearing you correctly? You sort of fuse yourself, your name, your brand with the message. And I think that makes a lot of sense. What's the hardest part of executing a StoryBrand for the average person?
Keeping it simple.
Okay.
Everybody in the room will be tempted, and it's my temptation too, to overblow it and make it way more complicated than it needs to be. And I just want to remind you so that you know that you don't have to make it more complicated than it needs to be. A guy got elected president with a red trucker hat and a slogan on it. That's how he got elected president, right? And that's how easy it is. Now I say that But I have to couple that with, it is unbelievably difficult to keep a message simple.
Yeah. One of the books I think you might have covered in your podcast was on writing, The Elements of Style. I think you mentioned at one point, and it's actually I'm not a writer, and I don't enjoy reading about writing. I bought Stephen King's book. I couldn't get through it. It's not something I'm interested in, but I actually understand and really value the written word, obviously. The Elements of Style mentions this idea of removing unnecessary words.
That's right.
And it's so hard to do that because you want to get everything in there. So the last question from you, Don, today is StoryBrand going to evolve? I mean, in the terms of the messaging you have, the framework, because right now everyone in the room you guys, every year you learn about new changes to Facebook, new changes to email, new changes to websites. Is the framework going to evolve? I know Story's been around forever, but is it going to evolve with the changing landscape of technology?
Well, the framework itself will never evolve because it's baked in over 2,000 years of, it's not, I synthesized it, but I didn't create it. And so that will actually never evolve. We will develop, we just hired another developer to develop software that helps you learn and understand and apply the framework much easier. And so we're going to release videos and educational material on how to use the framework to give a good keynote, how to use the framework in sales for sales scripts, how to use the framework to host a meeting, and all those kinds of things. So we will evolve in application, but the actual framework itself would be like saying, will the chords on the guitar evolve? No, they're fixed. They're not going to change.
I hope you guys feel comfortable with that, because we are always changing, and to have something that's actually stable in our business, I think for me is really refreshing.
It will never stop working.
Love it.